What if I told you there's a man whose life story is so bizarre, so chaotic, that even the wildest imaginations couldn't have dreamed it up? The sheer madness of today's subject, Vyacheslav Valerievich Datsyk, also known as Red Tarzan, and a man whose life reads like a checklist of chaos, attacking referees, raiding brothels, committing revered robberies, escaping from a mental institution, and openly embracing neo-Nazism. Oh, and did I mention he's also a professional boxer, kickboxer, and mixed martial artist? This is the story of Vyacheslav Datsyk, a man who defies logic and whose life has been an unending spiral of violence, insanity, and controversy. Trust me, you don't want to miss a second of this. Let's dive into the unbelievable tale of one of the most deranged men to ever compete in mixed martial arts. The enigmatic early life of Red Tarzan. Born on February 13th, 1980, in St. Petersburg, Russia, to a working-class family, Datsyk's early life remains largely a mystery. There's very little information about his upbringing, no reports of trauma, no signs of the chaos that would later define his life. Yet, the man who would later call himself the son of the Slavic god Perun, believing he was Red Tarzan, was brewing a storm of violence and madness beneath the surface. The unlikely entrance into MMA. Imagine this: you're a young, up-and-coming fighter named Andrei Arlovsky, on the brink of a promising career, having traveled to St. Petersburg with you're set to fight in your debut match, but at the last minute, your opponent pulls out. Panic sets in among the organizers. What are they going to do with a packed arena and no main event? Then, in a twist straight out of a movie, a commotion erupts at the entrance. A man is trying to fight his way past security, demanding to be let into the arena. That man is Vyacheslav Datsyk. He's not a professional fighter, at least not yet, but he's angry, he's large, and more importantly, he's willing. The organizers, desperate to salvage the event, ask Datsyk if he's ever fought before. He says no. They ask if he's brave enough to face Arlovsky. He says yes. And just like that, Vyacheslav Datsyk is about to step into the ring for the very first time against a future UFC champion. The fight itself was wild. Datsyk swung with reckless abandon, missing more often than he connected, while Arlovsky tried to bring some semblance of order with technical submissions. But Datsyk, driven by sheer madness and an apparent lack of fear, landed a rolling thunder kick that sent shockwaves through the crowd. Then, out of nowhere, he threw a devastating overhand right that knocked Arlovsky out cold. The crowd erupted. Datsyk, the unlikeliest of underdogs, had just knocked out a future MMA legend in his very first fight. The descent into madness. Datsyk's victory over Arlovsky should have been the start of a promising MMA career, but instead, it marked the beginning of a downward spiral that would see him become infamous for his actions outside the ring rather than his achievements inside it. Despite his shocking debut, he went on to lose 6 consecutive fights between December 2001 and February 2003. His in-ring behavior became increasingly erratic, culminating in a disqualification during a pankration bout in 2001, where he poked his opponent, Vitaly Shkraba, in the eye. As his losses mounted, Datsyk's career in mixed martial arts seemed to stall. He transitioned to kickboxing, appearing in his last professional fight for nearly a decade on August 23, 2006. Then, just as suddenly as he had burst onto the scene, Datsyk disappeared. Rumors began to circulate that he had died in a train wreck, but the truth was far stranger. The dark turned crime and mental illness. In March 2007, the rumors of Datsyk's death were put to rest when it was revealed that he had been alive all along, though far from well. Datsyk had been detained in St. Petersburg for his involvement in a series of armed robberies targeting mobile phone shops. But this wasn't just a criminal endeavor, it was motivated by Datsyk's deeply held racist beliefs. He claimed that he only targeted shops owned by non-Russians, a statement that revealed the full extent of his white supremacist and neo-Nazi ideology. Datsyk was a prominent figure in the Slavic Union, a now banned Russian white supremacist organization. He harbored obsessive anti-Semitic and anti-Christian views, instead exalting a distorted version of Slavic paganism. Datsyk even claimed that Jesus Christ was a Mossad agent and that he, Datsyk, was a white warrior sent by the Slavic god Perun to protect humanity. Given these delusions, it's perhaps not surprising that Datsyk was diagnosed with schizophrenia. This diagnosis allowed him to avoid criminal charges, and instead, he was confined to a high-security mental institution for therapy. However, his time there was short-lived. The Great Escape and the Pursuit of Asylum. In August 2010, Russian authorities made the questionable decision to transfer Datsyk to a low-security psychiatric clinic, believing he was making progress. This decision would prove disastrous. Using nothing but his bare hands, Datsyk tore a hole in the clinic's wire fence and escaped, but instead of lying low, he fled Russia, illegally crossing the border into Norway by boat. Datsyk's reappearance in Norway was as dramatic as you'd expect. Dressed in full Nazi regalia, he declared himself a white warrior and demanded political asylum. Joined by 2 neo-Nazis from an ex-Soviet Baltic state, Datsyk handed in a loaded weapon at the International Police Immigration Service in Oslo, claiming he was too raw for humanity and that he needed the maximum sentence possible to live a healthier life. Norwegian police quickly searched the tattoo shop owned by his companions, uncovering 5 illegal handguns, stolen military paraphernalia, and a bizarre assortment of Nazi memorabilia. Residents near the shop reported loud noises, screaming and banging, along with the sight of its occupants practicing fighting and boxing while completely naked. It was clear that Datsyk had brought his brand of madness to Norway, but his asylum claim was met with skepticism. Norway's legal struggles with Datsyk. While in Norwegian custody, Datsyk's behavior continued to shock. He twice attempted suicide, citing the isolation from other prisoners as the cause. When he was eventually placed back among the general prison population, he immediately began shouting racist slurs from his cell window, leading to his re-isolation. Despite a Norwegian police physician's report concluding that Datsyk did not suffer from a serious mental disease, his lawyers argued that the Russian authorities had fabricated a psychiatric diagnosis to discredit him, insisting that he should be allowed to remain in Norway. Datsyk's trial became a spectacle in Norway, with the media closely following every twist and turn. He claimed that Russian authorities had tortured him, using electrodes on his genitals and keeping him naked in an iron cage for 8 months. Despite these claims, Norway ultimately denied Datsyk's asylum request. On March 18, 2011, Datsyk was deported back to Russia, ending one of the most bizarre episodes in modern Norwegian legal history. Back in Russia, Datsyk was re-evaluated, and this time the authorities found him to be sane, voiding his previous schizophrenia diagnosis. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison for the series of armed robberies he had committed before his escape. But even behind bars, Datsyk's life was far from quiet. In December 2011, rumors circulated that he had been killed in a brutal prison fight. These rumors were so pervasive that Alexander Zubov, head of the Federal Penitentiary Service in St. Petersburg, had to publicly deny them, assuring the media that Datsyk was alive and well. Upon his release in 2016, Datsyk didn't fade into obscurity. Instead, he took on a new role, one that was as disturbing as it was bizarre. Datsyk appointed himself the head of a self-styled moral police, a vigilante force dedicated to purifying Russia. His primary targets: sex workers. What followed was a campaign of terror across St. Petersburg. Datsyk began setting up makeshift checkpoints, stopping cars and interrogating the occupants, demanding proof that the women were not prostitutes. He filmed these encounters, posting them online for the world to see. But this was only the beginning. Datsyk escalated his campaign, organizing raids on brothels. During these raids, he and his accomplices would assault the sex workers, strip them naked, and force them to walk through the freezing streets while shouting abuse at them. The footage of these raids shocked the nation. But Datsyk's reign of terror couldn't last forever. In March 2018, during yet another brothel raid, Datsyk was caught red-handed by undercover police. He was arrested and later convicted of hooliganism, breaking and entering, and assault. This time, he was sentenced to 3.5 years in a maximum security prison. However, in a bizarre twist, Datsyk was released after just 11 months, reportedly due to an expired statute of limitations, though the details remain murky. You'd think that after over a decade of imprisonment, Datsyk might be done with the public eye. But in 2020, at the age of 44, he decided to stage a comeback, this time in the world of combat sports. Despite his lengthy absence, his criminal record, and his controversial views, Datsyk quickly found promoters willing to book him. In Russia, Datsyk's wild past made him a draw. He became a star on Russian MMA YouTube, where videos of his fights racked up millions of views. Surprisingly, his comeback was relatively successful, at least by his standards. He focused primarily on boxing, where he won more fights than he lost, albeit against low-level opponents. One of the highlights of his comeback was a boxing match against Antonio Bigfoot Silva, a former UFC contender. Silva, who was well past his prime and on an 11-fight losing streak, was no match for Datsyk, who knocked him out. Datsyk also returned to MMA, where he faced Jeff Monson, a former UFC fighter and current Russian citizen known for his involvement in Russian politics. Datsyk managed to win by decision, bringing his MMA record to 14 wins and 19 losses. But the most anticipated fight of Datsyk's comeback was against Alexander Emelianenko, the less talented brother of MMA legend Fedor Emelianenko. Alexander, who had a troubled past that included a conviction for sexual assault, was another fighter looking to redeem his name. The fight, billed as a clash of disgraced fighters, did not disappoint. In just 12 seconds, Datsik knocked Emelianenko out cold, solidifying his place as one of the most controversial figures in Russian combat sports. In Russia, however, Datsik remains a cult figure, a man whose life has been defined by chaos, violence, and an unyielding defiance of societal norms. Despite his deeply flawed character, or perhaps because of it, Datsik continues to captivate audiences. Datsik's story is a testament to the dark side of fame. Despite his despicable views and actions, he continues to draw crowds. He's a man who thrives on chaos, who has defied the odds time and time again, and who shows no signs of stopping. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe, and stay tuned for more crazy sports stories just like this one. Thanks for watching.